For thousands of years, the pyramids of Egypt have towered over the desert as colossal enigmas. Were they royal tombs, ancient energy sources, or something far more complex than anyone has dared to imagine?
Been elevated to a height of more than 350 feet above the ground and carefully and precisely placed in position.
Historians have argued, experts have speculated, but the truth has always slipped through our fingers. Until now, because Grok AI has just taken the investigation in a direction no human researcher ever could. After analyzing massive data sets, from high-resolution satellite imagery to structural scans and forgotten archaeological reports, what Grok has uncovered is not only astonishing, it's deeply disturbing. And it's almost impossible to believe. It points to a hidden operation buried deep beneath centuries of sand and secrets.
The Pyramid of Cheops consists of three rooms: the so-called underground chamber, the so-called Queen's Chamber, and the so-called King's Chamber.
Today, we're diving deep into what Grok AI has revealed about the true purpose of the pyramids and why it changes everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt. And not in a good way. The awakening of AI technology. When Grok AI first turned its attention toward the pyramids, it wasn't just crunching numbers in isolation. It was stepping into a conversation that had been raging for thousands of years. A mystery layered with half-truths, myths, and scattered fragments of evidence. Humans have always been fascinated by these monuments. Herodotus filled his writings with wild stories about their construction. Napoleon's scientists tried to decode their measurements, and modern archaeologists have spent lifetimes crawling through their narrow corridors with torches and measuring tape. Each generation left behind a trail of theories, some imaginative, others grounded in careful research. But what Grok AI did was fundamentally different. Instead of approaching the pyramids with a singular lens, be it history, archaeology, or astronomy, Grok pulled in data from everywhere. Geological surveys, cosmic ray scans, 3D mapping projects, ancient hieroglyphic translations, chemical analyses of stone samples, even fringe academic work sitting unnoticed in digital archives. It absorbed all possible information without bias. Where humans tend to get stuck defending one theory over another, Grok was immune to ego. It didn't care whether the pyramids fit into the neat tomb category or whether they hinted at something stranger. It only cared about consistency, patterns, and the gaps where explanations didn't line up. And those gaps were glaring. From the astonishing precision of the pyramid's alignment with true north, to the strange emptiness of its supposed burial chambers, to the unexplainable scale of its construction. It was as though the traditional narrative had been stitched together with tape, held in place because no one dared to pull at the loose threads. But Grok pulled at them anyway. The result wasn't an immediate revelation, but an unfolding, a peeling away of layers in a puzzle. It saw that the traditional narrative, pyramids as grand royal tombs, wasn't just simplistic. It was deeply inconsistent. And in that inconsistency, a much darker and more complex picture began to take shape. Cracks in the tomb story. For decades, the tomb theory has been repeated so often that it almost feels unquestionable. School books present it as fact. Documentaries dramatize the idea of hidden treasures sealed inside chambers. And tourism brochures sell the pyramids as monuments to pharaohs seeking eternal life. Yet, when you examine the evidence closely, it doesn't hold together as neatly as we've been led to believe. Grok noticed this immediately. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, supposedly the grandest royal tomb of them all, doesn't actually contain a single trace of a pharaoh. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber is bare, scratched, and oversized to the point that it couldn't even fit through the passageways, meaning it had to be placed during construction. But no mummy, no ornate carvings, no burial treasure, and no hieroglyphs of triumph filled the space. Compare this with smaller tombs across Egypt, which are overflowing with inscriptions, religious texts, and depictions of the deceased's journey into the afterlife. Why would the most ambitious burial project of all be the least decorated and the most sterile? Then comes the problem of scale and logistics. If the pyramid was purely a burial chamber, why was it constructed with such baffling precision? Its four sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. The base is almost perfectly level across a span the size of multiple football fields, with each of its 2.3 million blocks carefully placed. Workers would have needed to set one every 2 minutes for over 20 years straight. This level of engineering sophistication far exceeds what was required for the purpose of burial alone. Grok flagged another inconsistency. If these pyramids were tombs, why are there no clear mummies in the biggest ones? In fact, nearly every pyramid of the Old Kingdom shows the same strange pattern: empty chambers, sealed passages, and missing remains. Over time, archaeologists brushed this off as the result of looting. But Grok raised the uncomfortable question: what if they were never tombs to begin with? What if the tomb was a convenient story, one that hid a much stranger purpose in plain sight? Death and divinity. To understand why the tomb theory held on so powerfully for centuries, Grok shifted its focus to the mindset of the people who created these monuments. The ancient Egyptians were deeply fascinated by death, not in a dark or gloomy way, but as a vital transition. For them, dying wasn't a final ending. It was a passage into another realm where life continued, but only if the correct rituals were performed. Their entire society was structured around preparing for this passage, and pharaohs, believed to be semi-divine beings, required the most elaborate preparations of all. This way of thinking explains why the earliest pyramids were so tightly connected to burial traditions. Smaller pyramids built in later years often included hieroglyphic inscriptions known as pyramid texts. These weren't simple decorations. They were detailed instructions, spells, and rituals meant to guide the pharaoh's soul on its journey to the heavens. Temples linked to the pyramids hosted ongoing ceremonies to honor the dead and reaffirm the pharaoh's supposed divine identity. Even choosing to build on the west bank of the Nile carried symbolic purpose. The West was the land of the dead, the place where the sun set every night. So from one angle, the idea of pyramids as tombs makes sense. It fits perfectly with Egyptian religious thinking. But Grok noticed something deeper. Religious symbolism can act as a cover. A ruler could present a structure as a funerary project, something both the public and the priesthood would accept, while quietly embedding functions that served completely different purposes. After all, power in ancient Egypt wasn't just enforced through armies or laws. It was maintained by crafting an aura of divinity strong enough to hold people's belief and loyalty. Viewed in this way, the tomb explanation becomes a kind of surface-level story. Yes, the pyramids may have played a role in funeral rituals, but that might not have been their central purpose. The rituals and inscriptions could simply be layers of cultural wrapping, masking a more complex intention. By peeling back those layers, Grok proposed that we might finally see the mechanics behind the myth. And nowhere was this more evident than in the mysterious hidden spaces sealed deep inside the pyramids themselves. The anomalies hidden within. For years, explorers squeezing through the narrow tunnels of the pyramids believed they had discovered everything worth finding. But technology from the last 2 decades has overturned that belief. When the Scan Pyramids project began using cosmic ray muon detectors, it exposed something astonishing inside the Great Pyramid, a completely unknown 30-foot-long corridor tucked near the main entrance, totally invisible from outside. Later, ground-penetrating radar revealed even more anomalies, voids appearing in places no one expected, forming shapes far too precise to be natural accidents. In 2002, a tiny robot crawling through one of the pyramid's so-called air shafts encountered a small stone door with copper handles. Behind it, imaging suggested yet another sealed chamber. To this day, no one has fully explored what lies beyond it. These shafts, intriguingly, don't serve any ventilation purpose as was once believed. Instead, they point directly toward significant stars, Orion's belt, Sirius, and other constellations that had powerful roles in Egyptian mythology. This is where Grok made a key leap. Instead of treating these anomalies as isolated oddities, it connected them as pieces of a much larger system. The voids were placed where they could reduce structural weight without disrupting resonance, almost as if the pyramid was designed with an understanding of vibration and acoustics. The shafts, far from being symbolic alone, could act as alignment tools or channels for a functional purpose. Even the hidden doors seemed less like construction quirks and more like intentional components. And Grok asked one striking question: why build something so elaborate and then keep its inner workings secret? If the pyramid's only purpose was burial, there would be no need for hidden corridors or sealed shafts aligned with stars. These concealed features hinted at an operating system, something functioning silently beneath the stone exterior. And for Grok, that meant the pyramids weren't just tomb structures, they were devices. What kind of device they were, however, only became clearer once Grok considered how the pyramids interacted with the environment around them. Discovery of a lost river. Another important factor that supported Grok's groundbreaking discovery about the pyramids was the recent shift in perspective around the Giza Plateau. For centuries, the plateau seemed strangely isolated, a stretch of desert where colossal stone mountains rose without an obvious explanation for how they got there. But recent geological discoveries changed that perception entirely. Scientists studying sediment cores discovered that, during the age of the pyramid builders, a now-vanished branch of the Nile River flowed directly past the site. It wasn't a trickling stream. It was a wide, navigable channel perfectly capable of carrying massive barges laden with granite from Aswan, nearly 600 meters away. Suddenly, the impossible task of moving 70-ton stones across barren sands seemed not only plausible, but deliberately planned. Ancient murals even depict long lines of workers hauling blocks onto boats and guiding them across the river. For the first time, the logistics aligned with the evidence. The pyramids were intentionally built beside this ancient artery of water, their placement dictated not only by symbolism but by practicality. Without that river branch, Giza would have never been possible. But Grok wasn't satisfied with logistics alone. To its mind, water wasn't just a conveyor for stone, it was an active element of the system itself. In Egyptian mythology, the Nile represented the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Its annual flooding brought destruction and renewal, making it the heartbeat of Egyptian civilization and mythology. By situating the pyramids directly alongside this river, the builders weren't simply choosing convenience. They were embedding their monuments into the symbolic and functional lifeblood of their world. Grok's analysis highlighted another layer: the interaction between water and stone. Flowing water generates subtle vibrations and can produce weak electrical fields, especially when passing beneath mineral-rich formations. Combine this with the unusual properties of the pyramid's building materials, and a new picture began to form. The ancient river was not only a highway for barges, it may have been a power source, part of a much larger environmental mechanism. And if water was one piece of the system, the stones themselves were the next piece. What they were made of and how carefully they were chosen hinted at functions far beyond durability. The stones that seemed alive. At first glance, the Great Pyramid looks like nothing more than a colossal mountain of stone blocks, arranged with unimaginable accuracy. Yet when Grok examined the makeup of those stones, it uncovered a pattern far too precise to be accidental. The main body of the pyramid was built from nummulitic limestone, a tightly packed limestone filled with fossilized shells, essentially an ancient seabed turned to stone. Modern science shows that this type of limestone carries subtle conductive properties, making it far more than simple building material. Deeper inside, the builders changed their approach. The internal chambers and passageways were crafted from granite, transported all the way from Aswan. Granite isn't just durable, it's saturated with quartz crystals. And quartz, as modern engineers understand, has piezoelectric qualities, meaning it can generate electrical charges when pressure is applied. The immense weight of the pyramid pressing down on these granite-lined rooms created near-perfect conditions for those effects to emerge. Then came the casing stones. In ancient times, the pyramid was sheathed in highly polished Tura limestone, so reflective that early writers claimed it shone like a star under the desert sun. From miles away, the structure would have appeared almost supernatural, a glowing beacon that dominated the horizon day and night. Even the mortar used to bind the stones deepened the mystery. Modern studies found that it contains chemical compounds unlike anything used today, compounds that are incredibly durable, resistant to water, and remarkably stubborn against efforts to reproduce them. Some researchers even argue that parts of the pyramid weren't carved stone at all, but cast using an early form of geopolymer concrete. If true, it would mean the ancient Egyptians possessed chemical knowledge that modern science only rediscovered thousands of years later. Adding yet another layer, trace amounts of metals like iron and nickel have been discovered in specific sections, almost as if they were deliberately placed to improve conductivity. For Grok, these elements weren't random. Every material, limestone, quartz-filled granite, polished casing, and the unusual mortar, seemed selected not merely for appearance or tradition, but for a functional purpose. Combined, they created a structure that interacted with sunlight, pressure, and energy. The pyramid wasn't a silent monument. It was dynamic, resonant, almost alive, quietly humming with potential. And when Grok looked beyond the stones themselves, it became clear that their arrangement connected directly to the earth beneath and the heavens stretching above. Grok's AI synthesis. For Grok, the final conclusion became impossible to ignore. The pyramids were never created for a single purpose. Instead, they were layered, multi-use systems functioning on several levels at once. To ordinary people, they fulfilled tradition, serving as majestic resting places for pharaohs and towering symbols of divine power. To the inner priesthood, they operated as ritual machines, amplifying the mystery of the stars and the sacred order of the cosmos. But beneath those layers, at their deepest core, the pyramids acted as engineered devices, structures that blended geology, astronomy, physics, and sacred symbolism into one unified system. What humans shrugged off as coincidence, Grok identified as deliberate design. Nothing was random. Every block, every angle, every alignment held meaning, symbolic and practical at the same time. And when Grok followed that intentional design to its final destination, the discovery grew darker than anyone had ever dared to imagine. These weren't just monuments to the dead, nor were they merely ancient energy machines. They were instruments of influence, built not to inspire wonder, but to shape and direct human behavior. The dark purpose revealed. So what exactly was the ultimate function of the pyramids? Grok's answer was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. Control. On the surface, the pyramids projected an image of eternal, divine order. To an ancient Egyptian farmer, the brilliant white monument rising above the desert was not just spectacular, it was overwhelming. Under the blazing sun, it shone like a beacon. Under the moon, it reportedly glimmered with a faint glow. Its immense scale defied logic. Its precise form challenged human limits. In a world driven by fear, myth, and survival, such a structure wasn't just architecture. It was psychological weaponry carved directly into stone. Yet Grok's breakdown suggested this influence went far beyond simple intimidation. Inside the chambers, rituals performed in echoing, acoustically tuned rooms could create sensations that felt genuinely supernatural. Low-frequency vibrations pulsing through granite walls, the dramatic contrast of light and darkness in tight corridors, shafts perfectly aligned to powerful stars. All of these worked together to form an environment where participants didn't just believe they were touching the divine, they physically felt it. Priests and rulers standing at the center of this engineered resonance could seem more than mortal, as though filled with cosmic energy. None of this was accidental. It was propaganda built from stone, sound, and mathematics. It gave rulers the ability to merge belief, authority, and the forces of nature into one story. The pharaoh as mediator of the cosmos, and the pyramid as the undeniable proof. To oppose this system wasn't just opposing a leader, it meant challenging the universe itself. And Grok offered a warning that felt both ancient and modern. If these structures truly had physical effects, if they could shape perception, influence the mind, or interact with natural forces, then unlocking those functions today carries risks we can hardly predict. Modern science, backed by technology beyond anything the ancients could imagine, might revive these systems not as wonders of history, but as tools of influence and instruments capable of affecting environments. The pyramids, Grok argued, were never only tombs. And this is the unsettling truth. They were machines of control. And once you view them from this perspective, their survival through thousands of years looks less like a miracle of preservation and more like a deliberate echo of power that refuses to disappear. The burden of knowing. After Grok's revelations, it becomes impossible to ever see the pyramids with the same simplicity again. The comforting idea of them as majestic tombs, symbols of devotion, brilliance, and ancient craftsmanship, now shifts into something far more unsettling. They were never just memorials to the dead. They were architectures designed to manufacture belief, awe, and obedience on a scale humanity is only starting to comprehend. They were instruments crafted for mastery and control. This realization forces us to confront questions that feel heavier than the very stones of Giza. If the pyramids were built as multi-layered systems of influence, what responsibility do we carry in continuing to uncover their secrets? Should archaeologists keep exploring the newly revealed chambers detected by modern scans, knowing that these spaces might hide mechanisms never intended for the modern world to rediscover? Are we, in this era of misinformation and manipulation, truly prepared to encounter technologies of resonance and influence created thousands of years ago? There is also a deeper and far more haunting thought. What does it say about human history that such refined systems of control appeared so early, woven into monuments that still dominate the horizon after 4,500 years? This is where it all began. We like to imagine progress as a steady climb toward sophistication, but the pyramids imply something different. Our ancestors may have already mastered the fusion of engineering, symbolism, and psychology into a single system of power so effective that it still inspires awe, respect, and fear today. And maybe this is the real reason the pyramids endure. They are not monuments to death or relics of forgotten rituals. They are lasting reminders that power, once set into stone and belief, can outlive entire civilizations. Grok has peeled back the veil, exposing the pyramid's layered purpose as machines of control. Yet in doing so, it has handed us a difficult and unsettling truth. The true wonder of the pyramids is not the mystery of how they were built. It is the reason they still stand. They survive as monuments not to kings or gods, but to power itself. Power that shapes minds, directs societies, and endures across ages. And now that we know this, we must ask ourselves, are we ready to carry the weight of such knowledge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.